We are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Wednesday, November 17th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are brought to you by PrizePicks, and we have an 11-game slate on the docket for today. Next 2 days will be really good. I think it's 6 and 9, which is nice. Didn't even think about it before it was coming out of my mouth. Before we do anything, though, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, how did you fare on yesterday's disgusting slate?
Not as bad as I thought. I got second in the $200 three max on DraftKings, so that got some money back. But overall, that slate was just awful.
It was truly miserable. I was super light on Dinwiddie 2 days ago, and he was 50% owned on FanDuel. Did not work out. And I was super heavy on 50% owned Tobias Harris yesterday. Also didn't work out. To me, those are two coin flip decisions, and I lost them both. And that is rarely fun. So we're on to the next one. Big time slate here. Lots of really wild news. We've got no Luka Doncic today. We have no really anybody on the Cleveland Cavaliers at this point. They're down everything that matters for all intents and purposes. We got a lot to talk about, Adam. I am ready to dive in if you are.
Yeah, let's go.
Not a lot of time to mess around today, so we're kicking it off with your Washington Wizards taking on the Charlotte Hornets. Wizards are 2.5-point dogs, 214 total. In terms of news for this one, nothing too crazy. Rui, Thomas Bryant, Bertans still out. PJ Washington still out. It's looking like we're going to have Bradley Beal back. So let's just start on the Washington side. I don't really see anything too fun here. Are you liking anything for your Wiz?
I mean, I pretty much like teams whenever they're facing Charlotte, but the pricing is not that great here on Washington. Bradley Beal being back makes it so, like $7,800 for Dinwiddie. That would be a perfectly reasonable price tag if Beal's out, but with him back, his rates are cut. He's likely to go back to playing 30, 31 minutes. Don't know that for sure, but that's what we've seen before. What we've seen in the past is, when Beal's active, when Washington can, they would prefer, it seems, to keep Dinwiddie around 30 minutes. Beal's priced up to almost 10K. He's certainly capable of just, scoring 50 actual points in any game, but that's not particularly likely to happen. And there's plenty of options, around him. I don't really see a whole lot here. I think, to me, the most interesting piece is probably Gafford at 4,400 from a salary standpoint. But even that, it's an 11-game slate. There's going to be a ton of centers. That Gafford's minutes are also dependent on how many minutes Harrell plays. Pretty often you're getting, 22 minutes or so for Gafford. So it's difficult to prioritize him, even though he is still pretty cheap.
Yeah, and we're not really seeing any ownership coming into this team. As I look at the Wizards right now, on DraftKings, the highest owned player this is crazy. 3% owned Montrezl Harrell. And I think that that's perfectly reasonable. Beal is at 9% on FanDuel, where he's only 8,700. I think that makes some sense, but there's no ownership coming in here. And I don't really think that it's being missed. It is a great setup for a game. I just don't love the pricing. It seems like mostly a stay away.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well.
On the Hornets side, we've got Mason Plumlee at 11% ownership on FanDuel. I think that makes some sense at 4,800. After that, everybody else is in single digits. Nothing too crazy. LaMelo Ball is 10,700 on DraftKings. That's a pretty big time price tag. He's only 9K on FanDuel. Very different. $1,700 disparity. I like LaMelo Ball on FanDuel. Gordon Hayward is significantly cheaper on FanDuel as well. But again, there's not a ton here for me. $8,100 Bridges relative to current ownership, probably my favorite play.
Yeah, I think he looks fine. He's still playing big minutes. It is important to keep in mind, he played 42 minutes last game. Kelly Oubre was ejected and Bridges subbed back in a little bit earlier than he normally would, but still expecting upper 30s in minutes from Bridges makes sense. This isn't an appealing matchup anymore, though, either. I think there's still a tendency for people kind of to look at Washington and think it's a good spot. They've been one of the most efficient defenses in the league. They're playing in the middle of the pack pace. This isn't Scott Brooks's Washington team that's going to just go out there, run up and down the floor, not defend anybody. So not the most appealing spot. Again, I think Bridges is fine. I agree that on FanDuel, LaMelo looks pretty good. On DraftKings, that's a really tough sell. Kelly Oubre is 4,600. I still don't mind taking shots on him in tournaments. We've talked about with Ish Smith essentially being phased out of the rotation for Charlotte. It opens the door for not consistent mid-20s minutes from Oubre, but for him, when he's playing well to get those minutes, he only played 15 or 16 minutes last game, but he had 3 fouls in the first half. Then he was ejected in the second half. So can't read too much into that. He does still have a ceiling, but still far from a priority on a slate of this size.
I really expected to get more out of Washington and Charlotte. It does, I do like the fact that Charlotte's basically unowned. Bridges 3% on FanDuel, Hayward 4.5%, Rozier 3%. I like these guys in terms of getting to them in GPPs and having 9% instead of 3% on someone like Bridges, but there's not any real stands in this game, and I don't have anything else that I really want to add. There's too much news elsewhere.
Yeah, it's you get this when you get healthy teams or teams that have had injuries recently and guys are priced up. It's not that you can't play any of these guys. It's just that their role on this slate is basically to be a contrarian piece in a lineup, as kind of a last guy into a lineup that is relatively low owned, gives you a high ceiling more so than building around these guys.
All right, well, let's keep it moving then. Indiana, 6-point favorites in Detroit, 211 total. And this is more of the same for Indiana. We're still waiting on news for Chris Duarte. He is questionable. That's really the only piece of news that we have in this game. If Duarte is in, this is business as usual for Indiana in that I don't really have a ton of interest. No one in double digits in ownership. Malcolm Brogdon is at 10% on DraftKings at 8,400. I probably think Karis LeVert is my favorite play, but I don't favorite is relative. Whether it's Brogdon, Sabonis, Turner, LeVert, they're okay, but much like Washington and Charlotte, I'm just not all that interested.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. I think you're never wrong for putting any of Brogdon, Sabonis, LeVert, or Turner into a lineup, but they're also, I think, priced correctly. I think Brogdon, to me, looks the best out of the 4 on DraftKings at 8,400. We still don't have a lot of minutes where, him, LeVert, and Sabonis have all been healthy, so I still think his price is appropriate, but it is coming down a little bit. He has been really good overall this season, and he is still playing huge minutes. You've kind of seen Sabonis at times not play as many minutes, although he did play 40 last time out. But Brogdon's pretty consistently been playing those 36 to 37 minutes. So, again, I think all of them are fine. None of them look like priorities, but Brogdon, I think, is the first one I get to.
8,400 for Brogdon on DK, I think looks pretty good. I don't have much else. The fact that Turner's $1,000 cheaper on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel is appealing, but doesn't really change anything for me. He's still like a 5% guy. I don't know.
Yeah. And for whatever it's worth,
just hard to talk about.
Yeah. Brogdon, LeVert, and Sabonis have all been active for 3 games this year. So, still not any sort of a sample size. Brogdon's played a total of 111 minutes, but he does have a 24.6% usage rate, which is down a few points from where he's at overall this season. That I think is to be expected. Sabonis has a 19.2% usage rate. So that's down from his already pretty low usage rate, still not getting a lot of assists. And then LeVert has a 27.9% usage rate. So he's leading the way so far out of the 3. I don't know if that continues going forward, but wouldn't be too surprising to me if it does. Looking at the rotations that they've been using, LeVert and Sabonis are getting run with the second unit, Brogdon less so. But, I think it's at least directionally right. You're going to get LeVert and Brogdon getting more usage than Sabonis, I would expect.
Now, things are a little bit different on the Pistons side. We've got, stop me if you've heard this before, Cade Cunningham mildly underpriced. To all the Cade faders from 2 days ago, I expected you were going to look the way that you do today. 5,800 on FanDuel for Cade, 6,100 on DraftKings, around 20% owned, completely reasonable. You should be getting to Cade Cunningham right now. I like Isaiah Stewart on FanDuel at 5,100. He's 20% owned, so I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be coming in over that number, but I know why it's happening. He's only power forward eligible, which makes things a little bit easier. Sadiq Bey also pulling a bit of ownership, about 10% on both sites. But to me, it's very clear. Cade Cunningham is the best play in this game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one big takeaway from last game, outside of the fact that, Cade Cunningham is apparently capable of scoring the basketball, is that we hadn't really seen what it looked like, what his minutes look like in a game where he isn't in foul trouble and he's not restricted. You'd gotten 32 minutes and then it was 30 and 30. They got blown out by the Kings, but Cunningham played 35.4 minutes. He subbed out with 4 minutes and 43 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. He sat for a total of 2 minutes or 3 minutes in the first half. He looks like he's going to play massive minutes in games where Detroit actually hangs in this game, and where they get blown out, he's still playing like 35, 36 minutes, I guess, if he's not in foul trouble. So huge minutes for him, 26.2% usage rate this year. I have no issue whatsoever going right back to him.
What are you willing to give him for minutes here? Are we talking like 35?
Yeah, 34.
Okay.
I had been doing 32, but I think
Same.
just seeing, I already kind of suspected that in games without foul trouble, he was going to play like massive minutes, because even when he was in foul trouble, he was getting to 30 or 31. Just seeing how those rotations looked without foul trouble, I'm willing to start giving him a couple extra minutes.
Any thoughts on the rest of Detroit? Isaiah Stewart, bit of a different play on DraftKings, probably less appealing. Saddiq Bey, 6,300, fine. It kind of fits the mold of like the Indiana and Washington and Charlotte guys.
Yeah, I think Bey, Grant, Stewart kind of all fit that role. There's certainly more minutes available for Isaiah Stewart with Kelly Olynyk out if he can stay out of foul trouble. He's about a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy, 5,200 if he plays 30 minutes. That's going to look pretty good, but nothing slate breaking most likely. Jeremy Grant certainly has a high ceiling, but as we've kind of talked about before, extremely scoring dependent. The salary is coming down a bit though. He's at 7,100. That's pretty reasonable for him. Saddiq Bey at 6,300 is fine as well, I think. But Cunningham, the priority for me, followed by any of Grant, Stewart, Bey, just kind of looking like perfectly fine secondary options.
Schedule for the rest of today. Coming up after this, NFL strategy show at 11 a.m. ownership edition. We've got the Jock Market NBA show at 1. We've got the No House Advantage NFL show at 4. Adam will be back for the NBA Deeper Dive at 4:45. Live before lock then from 6 until 7. We've got free content, NBA projections. If you're watching this, that's got to be music to your ears. Our projections are free today. Head to awesemo.com or look for the Nightbot link to find those projections, plus PGA rankings. So if you're looking to play any PGA contest this week, our rankings are free. On to the Boston Celtics, 4-point underdogs against Atlanta. Let's see here. Jaylen Brown still out. Q tag on Robert Williams, which honestly I hope ends up working out for me and he doesn't play so that I can stop playing him. Bogdan Bogdanovic and Kevin Huerter questionable for Atlanta. We'll start on the Boston side. Assuming Robert Williams is still in, we've got Jason Tatum, pretty heavily owned on FanDuel as he should be. 18% owned at 9,300. He's 10-2 on DraftKings. I think he looks fine. Dennis Schroeder, 14% and 12% owned across FanDuel and DraftKings. I think that's about appropriate given his salaries. And then after that, 10% to Horford at 6,800. He'll look a lot better if Robert Williams is out. I don't mind getting to him, but I think Tatum on FanDuel is the key piece here. Schroeder across both sites.
Yeah, Schroeder looks great to me. He was extremely bad in the game against Cleveland, but still played 34.4 minutes. You're seeing him pretty consistently play 34, 35 minutes in these games without Jaylen Brown. His usage is still there. It's not like he's taking a big hit playing with the starting unit. So I think he still looks good. Atlanta's been really bad defensively this year as well, so that's helpful. Tatum at 10-2 on DraftKings is fine. Not a priority for me, but it's still Jason Tatum. He still gives you a very high ceiling. Williams, if he's in, is okay. Horford with or without Williams, I think looks pretty good. Better if Williams is out, because I think that would solidify more minutes for him. And then in tournaments, I don't even mind mixing in $5,300 Marcus Smart or $3,300 Josh Richardson. You're seeing Richardson typically get around 28 minutes in competitive games since Jaylen Brown's been out. Smart is not doing a whole lot this year, but he's still playing big minutes. He's still 5,300. Like, he's going to just have games where he runs into 35, 40 fantasy points. So I think Schroeder's the priority for me. Horford moves up the list if Williams is out, but I think you can make a case for mixing in really like 6 different guys from this team.
The prices in this game are ridiculous. So Tatum is $900 cheaper on FanDuel. Marcus Smart is $1,000 cheaper on DraftKings. Robert Williams is $1,000 cheaper on DraftKings, but Horford is $700 cheaper on FanDuel. Josh Richardson is $5,100 on FanDuel and $3,300 on DK. They're all over the map. Everything is off both directions. Just pay attention to what you're doing if you're paying on both sites. You could probably differentiate Boston pretty well if you play on FanDuel and DK today and have everybody. Just got a super chat from Ben P. He said, thanks for the great work yesterday, Adam. Won the Yahoo $3 thanks to advice from the Deeper Dive. For a big slate like today, do you change your uniques or randomness?
Congrats on the win. And no, I don't. But that's, again, like, uniques and randomness are just something that you need to play around like in FC Rewind and just kind of see like what works within your process, because I don't, but I know that like everything else that I'm doing, stuff's still going to turn out the way that I want it to.
Yeah. I have the same sort of answer as Adam. I don't change that up at all, but that is unique to me and the things that I do. Uniques and randomness are like seasonings on your food. Some people like pepper, some people don't. There's no right or wrong answer for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's
just
just
got to make sure it works for you.
Yeah, the whole idea is that you just want it to be spitting out lineups quickly that look like you want your lineups to look. So for me, I have enough things in place that's going to happen regardless of slate size, but just pay attention to the type of lineups you're getting. And if, you're getting too much concentration on some players, then, increase your randomness. If you're getting too much like clumping together of the same players, then, change your uniques. But for me personally, I don't, because I don't run into those issues.
All righty. Next up, the Atlanta Hawks. The Q tags on Bogdan Bogdanovic and Kevin Huerter will loom quite large here. It makes it really difficult to talk about. As those guys get lopped off, other guys are just going to fly into being significantly more interesting. We've got Clint Capella, 15% owned on FanDuel at 7K. I think that's very reasonable. John Collins is 11% owned on FanDuel at 6,800. I think that's very reasonable. There's no real ownership coming into Atlanta on DraftKings at all. I like Kevin Huerter if he's playing at 4,200 and 4K, but we just don't know. Bogdanovic seems fine as well. Is there anything we could really dig into for Atlanta right now?
So I don't think Huerter has a really big impact on anything other than himself. The wing pieces, like, Hill, Gallinari, Reddish. So, if he's out, any of those guys look more appealing. Reddish and Gallinari obviously being the preferred two because they do more than Solomon Hill does. But, as far as the main pieces here, Clint Capella is going to look good with or without Kevin Huerter. Know that Boston is closing with one of Horford or Robert Williams. So this is a game where you could certainly see Capella play, a good amount of minutes. He played 34 against Orlando. You've been seeing him typically play around 34 these days. So I think he still looks good. John Collins at 7,300 is fine. I do prefer him in games where I don't expect Capella to close because those center minutes are really valuable for Collins, but still 7,300 for him is fine. Young, you're never wrong for playing him, but not a priority for me.
Okay. Keep your eyes peeled to the news. Make sure you're watching Deeper Dive live before lock and following Awesemo NBA so that you can get news updates, because this one is big. Like, if Kevin Huerter and Bogdan Bogdanovic are out, Cam Reddish is 3,400. Danilo Gallinari is 3,500. These guys are going to look very, very different now, particularly with DeAndre Hunter out. I mean, we saw Gallo in the last game play 28 minutes. I didn't know that he had that in him, considering the last time that I tried to play more Gallo when Bogdanovic and DeAndre Hunter were out, he played 7 minutes. So, bouncing around a little bit there for Gallo, but apparently he's starting to feel some form. 26 minutes the game before that. Well, this should be a really interesting talking piece. I know you can't predict blowouts, but I'm going to assume Brooklyn doesn't feel all that great coming out of a beating from the Warriors. And now they get a date with the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are missing like 5 of their best 10 guys. Cleveland, 11-point dogs, 10.5-point dogs in Brooklyn, 206 total. And as I mentioned, no Colin Sexton, no Lauri Markkanen, no Evan Mobley, no Jared Allen, no Lamar Stevens. Also, no Joe Harris and Paul Millsap for Brooklyn. I don't get the sense that's going to be the same sort of impact. Nick Claxton, questionable as well. Probably doesn't matter, but we'll see. We'll start on the Cleveland side, where you kind of got to play everybody. Ricky Rubio is 25% owned on FanDuel and DraftKings. Might be a little high, but I understand completely why it's happening. Garland is around 15% owned. Makes tons of sense. Dean Wade is primed to play a shit ton of minutes. He's a value play across both sites, 15% owned. Isaac Okoro, probably not going to shoot the way that he did in the last game. 20% owned on FanDuel at 3,600, 9 on DraftKings at 3,700. Chetty fixing to play some big minutes, 4,600 and 4K across FanDuel and DraftKings. He's about 20% owned. All of that makes perfect sense to me because they don't really have much of a choice.
Yeah, it all makes perfect sense to me, but it's also a situation where there's 10 other games and 21 other teams. So I don't mind. I think these guys are all good plays at their salaries. They're not priced for Mobley to also be out. But it's still, it's a situation, we we've talked about it several times this year, where there's just a difference between a player doing well for their salary and a player that you have to have at high ownership. So I think these guys are all good plays, but I really just don't mind getting away from them at high ownership in tournaments as well, at least within, individual lineups. So
yeah,
Rubio played 37 minutes as a starter last game. He's been the more productive of the two between himself and Garland when they're on the floor together this year. Garland's at 0.9 DraftKings points per minute. Rubio's at 1.15. So I prefer Rubio between the two. Kevin Love is probable. No idea how many minutes he plays, but that does add a body and, throw a little bit of a wrench into things. Like, I think, there's a chance that he plays most, like not all, but like a good amount of the 28 minutes that Mobley played last game and sort of just, holds that spot in the rotation. So like if you're getting, let's say 18 to 20 minutes from Love, that, at least it makes it so that there's not a ton of extra minutes to go around from last game. But, you still had Chetty play 31 minutes. Denzel Valentine's played big minutes in his couple of games since he's been in the rotation. He's only 3,300. So I think these are all good plays. I just, do still want to be aware of the ownership here.
Well, let's talk through them a little bit. Would you say Dean Wade is likely the easiest option to get to? 3,200, small forward eligible. I assume starting and playing monster minutes. Played 35 last time out. Probably has to be the backup center. Kind of. I mean, I got Taco Fall playing a little bit. Maybe they jam Ed Davis in there a little. I think Dean Wade's minutes and price make him my favorite option on DraftKings.
Yeah, but the counterpoint is Dean Wade sucks at fantasy.
Very true. 0.53 FanDuel points per minute so far this season. 0.7 just as a general outlook. Not fun.
He's played 111 minutes this season with Ricky Rubio on the floor. He's averaged 0.34 DraftKings points per minute with a 5.8% usage rate.
It's not good, dude.
He's like the perfect example to me of someone who's very likely to exceed a $3,200 salary and extremely unlikely to be someone that I absolutely have to have to win a tournament.
I think I agree with you there. Do you prefer Dean Wade or Okoro? Or is that just like whoever's owns less?
Yeah,
they're kind of the same thing.
Kind of the same thing. Okoro, I think, is better than Wade, but
yeah.
Okoro this year, 109 minutes with Rubio on the floor, 0.71 DraftKings points per minute. So, I mean, like he's not a high volume, a high usage guy, but he at least produces at a competent level.
Chetty, you get the guard forward 4K. Starting lineup, Rubio, Garland, Okoro, Wade, Love, or is it Chetty, Wade?
My guess is Chetty, Wade, but
okay.
It just seems
if Chetty starts, he's the best play on Cleveland.
Yeah, I think even if he comes off the bench, like it's hard to see how he doesn't play a bunch of minutes. But yeah, like 4K Chetty to me is just better than $3,200 Wade or $3,700 Okoro. I even kind of think $3,300 Valentine is better than $3,200 Wade, especially if Wade's getting more ownership.
I know where you're going there. I think Dean Wade might fall into like a real large amount of minutes. Not that it necessarily makes me want to like just jam him in, but I don't know if Denzel Valentine can make up that gap.
So if let's say Valentine plays like 26 minutes.
Okay.
Does Wade have to play the entire game to project better?
Kind of. He might have to. I mean, I've got Denzel Valentine as like a 0.85 guy, and I'm projecting Dean Wade at 0.7. We could call that high if we want. At that point in time, once you're at 0.7, you pretty much just suck no matter where it's coming in. It'll be a really interesting ownership exercise because that's really what we're talking about, right?
So one thing I'm interested in that I think really does matter for Wade, he's not going to get usage regardless, or you wouldn't expect him to.
No, I got it at 12, which might be sky high.
Yeah. The rebound, I want to see what we have in terms of rebounding numbers. I doubt we have any sort of reasonable sample here, though. He's played 41 minutes without Markkanen, Mobley, or Allen on the floor. 10.4% rebounding percentage. Overall this season, he's at 10.1%. No, sorry, 8.7%. So he has seen a bump there, which, what you would expect to lead to more production. But outside of that, like there's nothing that makes me think he's going to get more usage here. And there's also the risk, does for like every minute Kevin Love plays, Dean Wade becomes worse also.
Oh yeah, for sure. I gave Love 22. It would really surprise me if he played more than that. He hasn't played more than 23.8 minutes in any game this year. And obviously he's been out for 11 straight games. Him flying into 30 minutes for the Cavs seems so unlikely. Thank God Kevin Love is priced at 5,300 across both sites. And like, he kind of needs to be projected with those minutes to really pop in any way. It's a tricky team for Cleveland. Ownership is going to tell every story here. I will say this much, because I think that it feels like I've been advocating for Cleveland more than I probably should. I ran a crunch earlier today. 5 minutes. I am significantly under the field on Ricky Rubio, Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, and Cedi Osman, and I am neutral on Dean Wade. This is, again, with the assumption that Cedi is not starting. If Cedi started, I'd give him 4 more minutes. I would not be neutral to Cedi anymore. But Wade at 3,600, small forward, power forward on FanDuel is the only guy that I'm even neutral with.
Yeah, it's just a game where the ownership makes sense to me. Like I think 26% to Rubio is fine, 22 to Cedi is fine, 15 to Wade is fine. But I just know I'm going to be able to find high upside guys in other spots. And also, it goes back to when I guess, like I'm willing to err on the side of coming in underweight too, because we've just seen such concentrated ownership, even in large field tournaments this year on some of these, quote unquote top plays, where in previous years they'd be like 30% and then suddenly they're 48% this year because, people are just using medium projections more. So it makes me even more hesitant when it's a situation like this where it's like, yeah, I like Ricky Rubio, but this team still has a 99 implied total. They are 10-point dogs at Brooklyn. It's very easy to see how they just suck here. It makes me even more inclined to just err on the side of, if Ricky Rubio scores 50 at 20, at massive ownership, I don't win today. But yeah, there's just such a good chance that he ends up being even higher owned than this.
Yeah, absolutely. One final question for this, because I do think that this is a really important piece of this day. Is there anybody in this Cleveland rotation that you see playing in a blowout no matter what? Like, does that make Denzel Valentine slightly more interesting in that discussion that we had before? Does Dean Wade just stay out there no matter what? Or does that just immediately become Taco Fall or Ed Davis? Do you see anybody that sort of transcends it if it goes wrong in the fourth?
Yeah, I was kind of trying to think of that when we talked about it. I don't know how many got like they don't have any G leaguers listed on the injury report. So does that mean that these guys are just all on the bench?
I think so.
The random guys who don't play?
I think so.
Because if that's the case, then I would assume that like of the main pieces, maybe Valentine, but like it's tough because you're like Okoro's been hurt this year, so I kind of doubt that they give him a ton of blowout run. Cedi could not. Dean Wade could or could not. Same goes for Valentine. I just don't really feel confident guessing.
Sure.
There because like I just feel like I can make an argument for or against any of them.
Okay. Just wanted to check, because if you're like, yeah, I think Denzel Valentine plays both rotations and then plays in a blowout, then his 20, like if you have him for 22 minutes, he's got more of that right tail than you normally would for just a Denzel Valentine backup rotation.
Right. Like I think there's a good chance that happens. But...
Same. And it could also just be competitive, but we'll see. Also, feels like a really nice spot to let Kevin Durant get a blow or if he needs it. But let's talk about this. Brooklyn.
Does Dean Wade,
you got more Cleveland.
Okay, so I'm just kind of trying to think through this game. Like, I agree Dean Wade could play a ton of minutes. Dean Wade could also not even be in the closing lineup.
Rubio, Garland, Okoro, Osman, Love.
Yeah, or Denzel in there for any of those guys.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't have anything to add there. It sucks. Like, I don't want to have to pay attention to Cleveland like this. I'm happy that they're the biggest underdog, second biggest underdog on the slate. If this was like a 1-point game where Cleveland would be ultra important, it would scare the hell out of me. Now on Brooklyn, as best I can tell, we're doing the same thing we did yesterday. And We have a couple talking points for that. We know what we're getting out of Harden and Durant on both sites. They're like 10K on FanDuel and 11K plus on DraftKings. Patty Mills is 3,500 on DraftKings and still looking like probably the best option, particularly if he's going to play 40 minutes. We'll have that discussion too. Does LaMarcus Aldridge see the floor on in the first half? Who knows? When he checked in the second half, I had no concept of what was happening at that point. That made no sense to me. What are we doing with Brooklyn today?
So Patty Mills 3,500 should be popular again. I feel pretty similar. Right now, he's only projected for 14% ownership. I feel the same way I did yesterday morning, that's not going to be the case. I feel the same way I did yesterday. He's a very good value. If he ends up being, I mean, it was a 3-game slate, so I don't think he gets to 55% today like he did yesterday, but he still sucks from a fantasy standpoint. It's like a better version of Dean Wade, but not that much better. He's about a half of fantasy point per minute when he's playing with Durant and Harden. That's going to be the bulk of his minutes. And then, he's about a 0.7 to 0.75 fantasy point per minute guy when he's just playing with Harden, which is the rest of his minutes. So he looks like a good value, but I still want to pay attention to the ownership there because I think it's just very, very unlikely that Patty Mills scores enough raw points that on an 11-game slate, I can't find some way to make up for it. And if he does score 18 to 20 fantasy points again, like he did yesterday, you're in a really good spot again. So he's fine, but I just think that he probably ends up getting more ownership than he deserves again.
How many minutes does he play, though? Because he was certainly on a pace to play a bundle yesterday.
Yeah, but that's hard too, because, I mean, Javon Carter didn't play at all in the second half. He had 3 fouls in the first half. Are they really going to play Patty Mills like 38 minutes?
I don't think that's right. Javon Carter certainly played in the second half.
Oh, sorry. He played blowout run.
I mean, I knew that he was out. He played 21 and a half minutes, and I knew he had a bagel in the first half, so I didn't know how else he acquired anything after that.
Yeah, no, he played garbage time in the fourth quarter. I meant like rotation-wise, he wasn't in the rotation.
Sure.
And James Johnson wasn't in the rotation in the second half. You had Aldridge out there. I don't know. Like, I don't know what they do with this rotation. I assume LaMarcus Aldridge is back in the rotation, which just, takes minutes away in general, because like yesterday, you had, I guess Johnson basically played the backup center minutes, but I don't feel very confident that they run nearly as tight a rotation tonight as they did last night.
Nick Claxton's status will help. So do you like anything from Brooklyn?
Not really. Like the salaries at 4K on Brown and 3,500 on Mills, I think are fine. Obviously, Kevin Durant and James Harden have high ceilings, but they're also really expensive. There's not much that stands out to me as a priority here, outside of the obvious that Patty Mills is a good point per dollar value.
We good here?
Yeah.
Oh, what a game. On to the New Orleans Pelicans, 8.5-point underdogs in Miami, 220 total, which for some reason makes me feel like I typed it in incorrectly. No all the injury news is on the Miami side. No Markieff Morris, Q tags on Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Dwayne Dedmon. We'll start on the New Orleans side, where Josh Hart, 13% owned on FanDuel, 11 on DraftKings, is the only guy over 7% owned. It's the only guy that I really have any interest in. I find New Orleans to be a very difficult sell today.
Same here. Valanciunas' salary actually went up a bit, and we know that he's not as good with Ingram on the floor. He's still a high upside guy, but at this point, he is priced for Brandon Ingram not to be playing. He loses usage, he loses rebounding percentage, he loses assist percentage. It's a very difficult matchup at Miami. Ingram is relatively expensive. I'm with you. I don't see a whole lot here. This is just like Cavs Nets part 2.
Yeah. On the Miami side, it's hard to really talk about it until we know, but the key piece of information here is this. If Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo sit, Tyler Hero, the other guy that's in, and Kyle Lowry all look significantly better. If they're all in, which is what I have them right now, I want to play Bam Adebayo one way or the other. 9% owned on FanDuel, 7% owned on DraftKings, 8,400 and 8,200. Rates are just up across the board from like a usage perspective this year. I don't really anticipate getting to too much Lowry or Butler or Hero. Otherwise, I'm certainly not getting to anybody else on Miami. So Bam is a play for me no matter what, so long as he is in. if he happens to be out, that will give a bump to Lowry, Butler, Hero. If they're both out, then clearly we're like hoping to look at Dwayne Dedmon, but he's also questionable. I'm just rambling for Miami because I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, no, it's the same for me. I mean, I'm glad this is a 7:30 game so that we most likely have this news before lock. But I'm with you. Bam looks good no matter who, assuming he's in. Bam looks good no matter what. If Bam is out and Dedmon is in, Dedmon looks fine at 4K. If they're both out, I have absolutely no idea. But like if everyone is in, Bam's the only guy I'm really interested in. If Butler is out, Hero starts to look better, but he is priced up to 7,500. If Bam and Butler are both out, then Lowry, Hero, Robinson to some extent start to look better. But it's pretty difficult to talk about right now when half the team is questionable.
Duncan Robinson becomes a no-doubter cash play if they're both out, right?
Yeah. He got there. That was frustrating.
Don't take that seriously, folks. That's a joke. That's a joke. Yeah, I just want Bam today. And honestly, I hope that everybody's in because I think that I'm going to be over the field on Bam because of it. And if like Jimmy happens to be out, I think that neutralizes my interest in Bam because he ends up pulling the ownership. So
yeah,
terrible
like
game though.
I get what you're saying. I like obviously Bam projects higher if Butler is out, but I think he's a better play from like an edge standpoint today if Butler is in.
Right. Absolutely. Especially FanDuel center power forward eligibility too. Only 9% owned at 8,400. Given his current usage, I'm in for that. All right, Adam, it's time to talk a little bit about PrizePicks. They are the presenting sponsor of this show. And honestly, I've talked about PrizePicks a lot today because they are also the presenting sponsor of the process and the contenders. So round 4 for PrizePicks talk, you can use the promo code Awesemo for up to a $100 first match deposit bonus. You don't have to worry about sharks or optimizers or mass entries. You can make a 5-player lineup that can net up to 10x your entry fee. You can use multiple sports and make cross-sport entries if you want. Download the app in the App Store, or Google Play, or go play on prizepicks.com. We have free player prop tools on our website that will help you make the best picks possible. I've got some prize picks here for you guys. We're going to start it off in the game that we just talked about, and I'm going to hit you with the Miami Heat. Adam, over under 38.5 fantasy points for Bam Adebayo.
Over.
Yeah. I've got him at 43.5. So I'm massively over that mark. Love the idea of getting to Bam. And that's assuming Jimmy Butler plays. It can get even better after that. What about on the opposite side of this Miami game? I'm looking at the New Orleans Pelicans. Brandon Ingram over under 33 fantasy points.
Over?
Yeah, I agree. That one gets a little squirrely, but I think that Brandon Ingram is eventually just going to get back to his normal minutes. I've got him in for 34, and he's at the very least a fantasy point per minute guy. Crosses that 33 mark at that moment. I actually think he's better than that. So happily taking the over to Bam Adebayo and Brandon Ingram. We've got plenty of other tools for you on the website to help you out with your PrizePicks picks. Lakers, 8-point underdogs in Milwaukee. On the Lakers side, it's looking like we're going to get LeBron back on Friday. Today's not Friday, though, so he is still out. Trevor Ariza, Kendrick Nunn, Austin Reeves still out. Brooke Lopez and Dante DiVincenzo out for Milwaukee. Russell Westbrook, 9,700 on FanDuel. I will continue to like that price tag. AD is 10.6 and 10.9 across FanDuel and DK. That all seems fine to me. Talen Horton-Tucker is 5,200 on FanDuel, 4,800 on DraftKings, projected for about 28% ownership. I like Talen Horton-Tucker. That feels a little high to me, but I understand why it's happening. The minutes are there. You know, nobody else is going to do anything on this Lakers team. What are you doing with the chalk of Talen Horton-Tucker? Let's start there.
I think he's fine. I think at the very least you play him in cash. In tournaments, it just depends what the rest of your lineup looks like. He's at least at a price point now where he's capable of failing. Like when he was 3K the other day, it was just like the only reason I didn't have 100% Horton-Tucker was just that there ended up being tons and tons of value that day. So I mixed, some other guys in, but at 3K, it was just like, there's no way that he fails. 4,800, it's at least possible. Like if he goes, and then he also is at least at a point where like, if he goes and gets 26, 27 DraftKings points, that's very easily replaceable as well. So I think he's still a very good play. I think that more often than not, I'll be using him as one of my value pieces in tournaments, and then using lower owned guys elsewhere. But he is at least at a point where he's capable of failing, and within some lineups, I'll get away from him.
Okay, yeah, we're on the same page there. What do you do with Russ and AD?
I don't have much
nothing with Russ on DraftKings.
What'd you say?
Nothing with Russ on DraftKings.
Yeah, I don't have much interest in either one. They're just both priced up. It's a huge slate. Typically, I've been ending up going a little bit more balanced on slates like this because the top tier players have been appropriately priced. And so one thing I've sort of noticed overall this year is it seems like people are still jamming stars and scrubs lineups, even though the pricing doesn't really suggest that you should be. The reason that stars and scrubs has always been such a good strategy is that typically top tier guys just are naturally like $1,000 on their priced. That hasn't really been the case recently. And there's been plenty of, mid-range upside, especially on slates of this size. So, again, not that there's anything wrong with getting to Anthony Davis or Russell Westbrook, but I'm perfectly willing to go with, a few mid-ranged guys over a popular Patty Mills plus Davis, type thing.
Okay. Anything else that we need to touch on for the Lakers?
I don't really think so. I mean, Horton Tucker, clearly the best play. Wayne Ellington only played 21 minutes last game. That was kind of surprising and disappointing to me. Malik Monk played another 27 minutes. I think he's at least a reasonable pivot from Horton Tucker. Like, Horton Tucker's the better play without a doubt, but 4K, saving $800, going to Monk, certainly capable of getting hot and taking on a bigger scoring role. So not anyone, not the type of guy that I want a lot of exposure going to, but he is projected for 1% ownership.
On the Milwaukee side, really anxious to get your thoughts here. We've got Bobby Portis 13% owned on FanDuel. We've got Giannis 13% owned on FanDuel. There's no ownership coming in anywhere else in this game. It looks like we're going to be getting Chris Middleton back for today, finally. I put him in for 30 minutes. I don't think that he's going to be particularly relevant. Could he come in and just play his normal rotation? Sure. I just don't know if Milwaukee has the incentive to just let him rip after he being out for so long. So keep an eye on his actual status for the game. The piece that I want to talk to you about is this. Giannis Antetokounmpo is 12,500 on DraftKings. That's a pretty healthy number. Now, there will be enough value for you to get to him. He's 11-4 on FanDuel at 12.5% ownership. I'm going to have a lot of Giannis on a day like today if he's 12% owned and only 11-4.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty good option on FanDuel. I have a tough time on DraftKings, even at the low ownership. It's always appealing to get a 3% owned Giannis into your lineup. But realistically, okay, he goes and gets 65, 70 DraftKings points on a slate this big. That's good. It's you like having that in your lineup, but it's not going to be like impossible to win without that, I don't think. And if he goes and gets like 55 or 60, like, you're in trouble. So I find it difficult to get there. And then Middleton coming back certainly doesn't help anything either. Drew Holiday at 7,300. I do want to, like you said, kind of keep an eye on what Middleton's status and what his role is going to be in this game, because I think Holiday is priced up a bit if Middleton's going to just step back into the starting lineup. But if he's going to come off the bench and play 24 minutes or something, Holiday at 7,300 I think looks decent.
Are you seeing anything else here? Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, any of those guys?
No, not really. Not with Middleton coming back.
Yeah, I'm going to end up playing a lot of Giannis if he's 12% owned on FanDuel. That's going to be my spot. I don't mind paying that price tag. All right. Well, time to talk about the game with the biggest line. That would be the Orlando Magic against the New York Knicks. All right. Well, Josh Gillum, I gotta stop you right here. Giannis is not unplayable at his DraftKings salary. He's Giannis. He's never unplayable. You play him less, you will never correct the lineup because you saw Giannis in it on DraftKings. I promise you this.
Yeah, unplayable. You guys are arguing semantics, but
yeah, unplayable is you can never describe Giannis Antetokounmpo as unplayable. A dude can go for 90 today.
Yeah,
like Orlando. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think he's a particularly good play even at the low ownership. But yeah, like if I build a lineup that has Giannis where I don't hate the other pieces, like obviously I'm not going to redo it. Like Giannis can go for 90 or 100.
Yeah, that's you can't describe that type of guy as unplayable. It's just not going to work with that. Orlando Magic, 11.5-point underdogs in New York, 208 total. For the Orlando side, Q tag on Jalen Suggs, which will be important. Nerlens Noel out for the Knicks. For Orlando, and obviously I put Suggs back in for this one. Most of Orlando is quote unquote unplayable on DraftKings. 7% owned. Wendell Carter is the highest owned guy there. He is, however, pulling quite a bit of ownership on FanDuel. He's at 20%. He's 6,200 with power forward center eligibility. Franz Wagner not getting any love, only 4,500 and 5K, 0.8 fantasy points per minute, playing big minutes. He's a guy that I end up getting to a little bit more than I should. Do you like anything here for Orlando against the Knicks?
Not really. If Suggs is back, 4K still gives you a ceiling there, but not a priority for me here. Carter looks fine. Cole Anthony always has a high ceiling, but he's getting pretty expensive as well. He will look better if Suggs were to not play, but assuming he's back, you have, a rising salary on Anthony. So there's just not a whole lot that stands out here. Again, it's a team that is relatively healthy, assuming Suggs plays. They have a 99 total. It's a big slate. I don't see a ton.
Yeah, this one's tricky. The Wendell Carter price on FanDuel is a very reasonable one. I understand why that ownership is coming in, but this is a terrible, terrible spot and team. What do we do if Suggs is out, though? We're bumping Cole Anthony a little bit, I'm assuming. Does anybody else stand out or become viable?
Yeah, I think it's a bump for Anthony in terms of usage and assist opportunities. Harris started last game. He played 30 minutes. He's still Gary Harris, so that's not super useful. I was kind of surprised RJ Hampton didn't play more last game. I think potentially you could see more than the 15 minutes he played if Suggs sits, but certainly not a guarantee. Okeke played 24 minutes. He's 3,100. Like if Suggs is out, you can basically gamble, roll the dice on any of Gary Harris, Chuma Okeke, RJ Hampton, hope that one of them runs into a big game here at close to minimum salary and probably also close to no ownership. But there's nothing that would suddenly start to look great. It's still like you can take Suggs out. It's still a team that has a million interchangeable bodies.
On the New York Knicks side, Julius Randle is the only guy in double digits in ownership on FanDuel, where he's only 8,600, 19% owned. I like Julius Randle. I'll probably come under that because he's already getting the ownership, and I'll just find something else in that range. RJ Barrett is interesting to me, but he's been terrible this year. He's about 5% owned on both sites, but only 5,300 shooting guard small forward on FanDuel. No ownership coming in elsewhere. Can we roster anything from New York today? Right.
Yeah, you can, but it's another team where there's several guys that are good contrarian plays, but not priorities. It's a good matchup against Orlando, but Julius Randle's appropriately priced. I think Kemba, Barrett, Derrick Rose, Rose and Kemba obviously not in the same lineup. Those guys in tournaments are going to be pretty appealing just because they're unlikely to pick up a lot of ownership, but someone on this Knicks team probably has a really good game here. Figuring out which one it's going to be is obviously the hard part, but the highest owned guy, the highest projected ownership right now on DraftKings is Randle at 7%, $5,500 Barrett at 5%, $4,600 Rose at 3%, $5,100 Kemba sub 1% right now. I think that there's a lot of upside there. So these are pieces where, when we talked about, for example, Ricky Rubio at 6,500 being someone that is likely to do well for his salary, but if he only gets 36 DraftKings points, it's probably replaceable. It wouldn't be surprising if any of these, 4 to 5K Knicks guys or $4,500, $5,500 Knicks guys go for 35, 36 DraftKings points at virtually no ownership.
I just don't know what to make of these minutes anymore. RJ Barrett's minutes are all over the map. Evan Fournier's minutes are just down, I guess. They're not even all over the map. Kemba yo-yos between 18 to 30. That makes it even more difficult, where you almost have to take the stand before you project them.
What'd you say?
You almost have to take the stand on the Knicks before you project them, just by saying, okay, this is the day that he's going to get this minutes. Otherwise, you project everybody at some sort of random ass median and you get nobody.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll still probably get to a little bit just because the ownership's so low, and that's what randomness and stuff is for.
What do you project Evan Fournier's minutes for on a day like today?
27, 28.
Okay, other than 27. Revenge narrative for you there?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Of course.
Yeah. Or like
Yeah, I mean,
RJ Barrett at 30. I have 32. I don't feel comfortable with that at all.
no, me neither. I mean, the thing is, we've seen the bench unit play well. We've seen them continually take minutes from the starters. I'm still not like, I'm not going to just project every Knicks game going forward for everybody to play 24 minutes except Julius Randle.
Right.
So I still think that like if the starters play well, they're going to get more minutes. You saw, the bench played well against Indiana again last time out. 5-0 run to open the fourth quarter. You know that you're going to get, or typically you're going to get around 48 minutes from Rose and Kemba. They played about 45 last game. But it's just, I think the salaries are low enough now where they will start getting into my lineups even with medium projections.
Okay. Anything else here for Knicks?
No, I was just reading this ridiculous thought process.
Yeah. All righty. Sacramento and Minnesota. This one's going to be a big one from a fantasy perspective. The Kings are 2-point dogs in Minnesota, 224 total. Q tags on Naz Reid and Josh Okogie. For Sacramento, we've got, honestly, I expected this to be significantly higher. We can have a conversation about why it isn't. 15% owned on FanDuel, 18 on DraftKings for Chimezie Metu. Metu, a center only on FanDuel. So thanks for that, FanDuel. Power forward only on DraftKings. Tyrese Halliburton is at 11%. Harrison Barnes is at 9% on both sites. De'Aaron Fox continues to be very interesting to me. Sub 8K on FanDuel. Been playing a little bit better as of late. Rashawn Holmes certainly looks good just about any day because he's capable of being really good. I want to get a lot of shares of Sacramento, but if I'm focused on anybody in particular, at least on FanDuel, it's Fox and Metu. Am I missing something? Why is he not more than 17% owned?
I don't know. I think this is finally a team where there's a lot of pieces to like, but Metu looks really good to me. He's like a 0.85 fantasy point per minute guy with De'Aaron Fox on the floor since last year. He played 24 and a half minutes in his first start. He played 31 minutes, almost 32 minutes last game against Detroit. He is someone where, to me, he's the opposite of somebody like Patty Mills. Patty Mills can, or Dean Wade, they're cheap. They're likely to play enough minutes. They just end up being good point per dollar options because of how long they're on the floor. Metu, I think, is much more likely than either of those guys to put up a score in this price range that you really need in your lineup. Like Metu, to me, is just by far the one that's more likely to get 35 DraftKings points and be just a key piece. So I don't really know why his ownership's projected so low. I think he's a very good value. I like him more than any of the value we've talked about so far. At least, the sub 4K value.
Like, I only gave him 28 minutes. I can be very low on that mark. And at 28 minutes, I still think he's one of the best value plays we're going to have on the slate. And I think that he could very easily play 32 or more if need be. So all over getting to Metu. What else do you like from Sacramento?
One other piece on Metu, like Harkless played 7.5 minutes the first game Metu started. Harkless did not play at all last game. So that's one thing that makes me like him more also. It's not like, at least in the 2 games he has started, it's not like he slid into the starting lineup and then he's still in some weird timeshare with Mo Harkless where whoever plays well gets the minutes. They just were like, okay, we're done with you. And they moved Metu into the starting lineup. So that makes me feel a little bit more confident in his minutes also. Granted, we did get Marvin Bagley in the rotation last game. That is scary. But
so I think I know why that happened.
What?
I think I know why that happened.
What do you mean?
The Pistons are pretty heavily rumored to be trading for Marvin Bagley. And conveniently, they just played the Pistons. To me, that was a spot where they have the ability to play someone in the rotation that sort of minutes. And they put him out there to show them that Marvin Bagley isn't like dead on the end of the bench.
So do you think that Harkless just takes those minutes back?
It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, either way, like Metu seems to be where they want to go right now. He's played very well, even in the he led the team in plus minus in the loss in his first start. He was actually second, they're third. They all played really well against the Pistons. I think he just looks really, really good.
Same. Like whether it's Bagley or they like chop Terrence Davis and Mo Harkless in half, I don't think that those minutes will ultimately matter. And I don't really think that they're going to matter to Metu from everything that I've read and heard about the Kings at this point. But yeah, I think that was a Marvin Bagley showcase as much as you can showcase Marvin Bagley, specifically against the Pistons. Anything else here for Sacramento?
I'm with you on Fox. I think, he has struggled this year, but the salary is coming down. It's not it's a game that should have a lot of possessions. It should be a high scoring game, 224 total. So I like the ceiling that Fox offers. Rashawn Holmes is always a high upside play. Not a priority for me at center, but I think Metu is the priority. And then really any of the other starters in this game environment look like reasonable tournament plays. Even Davion Mitchell off the bench at 4,100, I think is a decent tournament option, assuming he's not getting much ownership.
Okay. 640 concurrent viewers, only 127 likes. Let's do the thing here. Hit that thumbs up. Let's run that number up to 200. Doesn't cost you guys a thing. Helps us out a ton. So if you can, hit the thumbs up on this video. The Minnesota side of this game now, a lot of ownership. Anthony Edwards, about 20% owned on both sites. Karl Anthony Towns, about 12% owned on both sites. D'Angelo Russell, 15 on both sites. Patrick Beverley, 10 to 15 across both sites. I largely agree with all of those things. I talked a lot about Anthony Edwards earlier today. I think D'Angelo Russell, now that he's playing bigger minutes, stands out as well. And it's a fantastic fantasy matchup against Sacramento. So for most of Minnesota's starting lineup, I want to have them.
Yeah, same here. I think all of this ownership makes sense. It's all reasonable. Edwards is playing huge minutes in competitive games, coming off another game where he played 39 minutes. Towns actually played 40 in that game with Naz Reid out. Beverly played 34 minutes. That was the first time we had seen him need to play in the fourth quarter in a couple of games. So that reiterates that he's getting normal starter minutes. Russell played 35 minutes. It's a good spot. This is a slate clearly. There have been a lot of spots that we're not really that interested in so far. This is one that I just love. And I think getting to any number of these guys is fine. I still think Russell is underpriced to 7,300 for the number of minutes he's playing now. Edwards has a 30 to 31% usage rate, even in the games with D'Angelo Russell this year, and he's playing huge minutes, so he looks good. Beverly looks good. Towns always, a reasonable tournament option, but even he starts to look a little bit better on a slate like this because, for one, you don't have Jokic, but like Giannis being $2,100 more expensive than Towns. If Giannis is 11-1, you're just saying, okay, well, I'm going to find the money for Giannis. But when you have that kind of a price difference, Towns starts to look really good. Even Jared Vanderbilt at 3,400, he is only projected for 3% ownership right now. I think he's one of those guys that, he's not someone that I'm going to go to in cash, but he could pretty easily, if he's playing well, this is assuming he starts, but if he's playing well and is actually able to stay out of foul trouble for once, you could get 26 to 28 minutes from him and he beats somebody like Patty Mills. Like he's the type of value play where if I am going stars and scrubs, I like using somebody like that because I think there's a lot of volatility and people are just not paying attention to him.
If Naz Reid is ruled out, where will you project Karl Anthony Towns minutes?
38.
Okay. I agree. Nothing else to add there.
Yeah. And this is the second game, by the way, so Vanderbilt played 23 and a half minutes. Jaden McDaniels played 30. Reed obviously was out. But in the game before, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know Jared Vanderbilt was in foul trouble. And I think McDaniels played like 32 minutes. So my point being that there's a lot of minutes potentially available there.
Yeah, absolutely. Love this game from a fantasy perspective. Anything else?
No, just play a lot of this game. Even Beasley at 4,100 is fine. Not that you're going to prioritize them, but I guess my point here is the starters are all obviously good plays, but even the cheap guys on Minnesota, they're just not going to get any ownership. And this game environment and the number of minutes available means there's a decent chance that one of these guys just blows up out of quote unquote nowhere. And you suddenly have, a really, really good value play.
Got a promo code for you guys if you're interested. And this one near and dear to my heart as a Duke fan. Coach K, one big word. That is the promo code for our college basketball DFS projections. Your first week is only $5 when you use the promo code Coach K. It's all caps, one word, $5 for college basketball projections. You can click the link that could potentially pop up from Nightbot. There might be one in the description of this video. This offer is good through Saturday. So you've got a couple days. Saturday, November 20th, this one goes away. So use that promo code Coach K. Stop guessing and start winning. Join up, awesemo.com, or go to awesemo.com/promos. You can see it on the screen. That will help you out. Yeah, Cantor. I mean, I'm lapsed. I don't really care what happens. I don't watch any longer, but that was my college basketball team before Daily Fantasy Sports removed all interest of individual teams from me. 3 games to go. This one is the toilet bowl for the day, but unfortunately, I think that it is going to make or break the entire slate. The Houston Rockets are 3.5-point underdogs in Oklahoma City with a 211 total. Boy, the worst part is I'm going to end up watching some of this trash. Kevin Porter Jr. is questionable. That's all we have to worry about from a news perspective. Christian Wood is 30% owned on FanDuel, 16 on DraftKings. I think that he looks really good. 30 feels high, but I mean, this game is wild. Kevin Porter Jr. is not really pulling any ownership right now, probably because of the Q tag. I like him quite a bit if he is in 6K or 5,800. Jalen Green might start being good at some point in time. Eric Gordon appears to be in. How do we handle Houston?
Yeah, God, with the exception of Cunningham and even to some extent Cunningham, I hate this rookie class. They've been so expensive. Yeah. But I'll go back to Jalen Green. I mean, he's 4,800. He plays big minutes in competitive games. He's going to make some shots at some point. Christian Wood, I think, looks great at 7,700. That decreasing price tag looks really good. If Porter is in at 5,800 on DraftKings, I think he's a really good play. Tate is okay. Even Şengün at 4K off the bench, not in the same lineup, obviously, as Wood, looks okay. But I think Wood's the priority. Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., assuming that Porter Jr. is able to play, are my second and third pieces here from Houston.
Yeah, that 30% ownership on Wood on FanDuel, like I'm not surprised by it at all. He graded out really well. It's a big number. Anxious to see where that ends up, but he is a guy that can completely ruin your night by not having him, especially in a matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah. I was going to say even Gordon at 4,600 is kind of interesting, but he's also just sort of done nothing this year.
Yeah. Well, keep your eye on Houston. Let's move it over to Oklahoma City. Wow. Okay. I knew that he was going to be a decent play. I didn't expect this. So, all right. Shea is 20% owned on FanDuel at 7,900. Completely reasonable in a matchup against Houston. He looks great. Shea, Dort, Giddey, and Baisley are all about 10% to 15% on DraftKings. Josh Giddey at 5,300 on FanDuel is 45% owned. I will be well under that number, even though I think Josh Giddey is one of the 5 best plays you can find on FanDuel. What do you want to do with Oklahoma City against the Houston Rockets? God, this game is bad.
So your Giddey point there, I think, is like the perfect example for Dave and Chad had said, when do you stop looking for value and care more about raw points? And it's like the perfect example of realistically, you don't care about value at all.
Yeah.
Value is just an easy way of saying, I think this guy is underpriced. He's likely to do well for his salary. And if you find a bunch of underpriced guys, then in theory, it makes it easier to get expensive guys that are going to score the most points into your lineup. But in the final product, value doesn't matter. Like if you have, it doesn't matter. It's all raw points. Like you just win based on raw points. So like with Giddey, he's getting all that ownership because he is a very good value and because he fits very easily into lineups. And when you build lineups, it's just going to be like Josh Giddey, because he's like one of the most efficient pieces. But at the same time, at the end of the day, when you go back and your lineups are made and everything, all that matters is how many points he scored. And so he can do well for his salary. And this is back to like the Ricky Rubio conversation from earlier. He can do well for his salary, but as long as it's in like the mid 30 fantasy point range, you don't have to have him to win because there's going to be a million guys that score 30 plus fantasy points. And there's still, even though he's a good value, there's still a relatively high chance that he finds a way to fail, whether it's foul trouble, injury, plays poorly, whatever it is. Guys fail all the time. And that's why, like, when the ownership gets that high, even though he is a safe play and he looks like one of the best plays, it's still, you're still weighing like the chances of him failing versus the chances of him putting up an actual score that you have to have, not just a score that is good for 5,300. So that's why, you get back to he's clearly a top play, but also the ownership is insane.
Yes, it is. 45 is a big number. I figured it would be high. I didn't think it would be that high. That is aggressive. Still like him. Like I'll have a little bit, but if that maintains, I will not have 45. That much I can tell you. Even though I do
Josh
think he is the best
some
player in this
plays
game.
have upside, some don't. 100% true there. That's one of the like biggest things to pay attention to also. Like, it goes back to, the Patty Mills thing. Patty Mills can get 30, but normally his range of outcomes is a lot narrower than like guys like Metu or Taylor Horton Tucker, that
Jaden McDaniels is a value play with minimal upside.
Right. Whereas Vanderbilt is one that has an actual ceiling.
Yeah. You in for Shea and Dort and Giddey and Baisley on DraftKings? That all makes sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah, they all, Giddey's salary is definitely more prohibitive on DraftKings than it is on FanDuel, but he does still lead the team in assist percentage. He's still a good option. He's likely to play around 30 minutes in a good matchup. Shea looks fine. I like Baisley at 5K. Dort at 4,900 is kind of whatever, but he's been shooting well lately. We'll see if that continues. But yeah, I think these guys are all fine on DraftKings, but none of them stand out the way Giddey does on FanDuel.
On to the Dallas Mavericks, 8-point dogs against Phoenix. No Luka Doncic, no Maxi Kleber. Frank Kaminsky, questionable, doesn't matter at all. Jalen Brunson's one of the best plays of the day. Might be the best play of the day. 39% owned on FanDuel, 49% owned on DraftKings, and vital as far as I'm concerned, even at those ownership numbers. Porzingis, pretty heavily owned on DK, 27% at 7,400. He's 8,800 on FanDuel, so not as easy to get to, but still very clearly someone you want to roster. Tim Hardaway also sees a big bump with no Luka, 5,200 and 5,300 guard forward eligibility, 20 to 25% owned. I like those three guys a lot, and I would imagine I don't get to very much of anything else from Dallas.
Yeah, 1.49 DraftKings points per minute in the games that Porzingis has played without Luka. Looks really, really good. Obviously at 7,400. Brunson has played well this year anyway. He steps into a bigger role without Luka. He has played 12 games with Porzingis without Luka. 0.89 DraftKings points per minute, 30 minutes per game. I think it's likely you see even more minutes than that. And then Hardaway, like you said, likely to see some more usage here as well. 26.7% usage percentage for him in 13 games without Luka and with Porzingis, 1 fantasy point per minute. So all three of those guys look good to me. Outside of that, I'm with you. I don't think anybody sees like a huge benefit. You still can look to a $4,400 Finney Smith as just a last piece in, but he's not likely to benefit a whole lot from Luka being out just because that's not, he's not the type of guy that's going to just like pick up a bunch more usage.
I don't have anything else to really say here. I think it's really obvious for Dallas today. I assume Trey Burke enters the rotation as like Jalen Brunson's backup, but I don't think that matters.
Yeah, that's probably true.
On the Phoenix side, we only have one thing that we need to talk about here because it's the same situation for Phoenix all the time. They're just priced normally and they're really difficult to get to. They fit into that Washington, Indiana discussion, Utah that we had over the past couple of days. But for some strange reason, DeAndre Ayton is 6,200 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel, by the way, which is reasonable. 21% owned on DK, but clearly DeAndre Ayton is one of the best plays you'll find on DK today.
Yeah, I actually had a lot of him last time at 1% owned, and he did well, and it didn't matter because that slate was just insane. But once again, just this is a spot where coaches just absolutely lied. They were like, Ayton's not on a hard minutes limit, but he's certainly not going to play his normal minutes. He then played 32.9 minutes, which I don't have it in front of me, but I think is probably exactly what he's averaging this year, give or take.
It's the second biggest number he's had this year behind 33.8.
Yeah. So the point being here, one, coaches just lie constantly. And two, there's no reason to be worried about his minutes because he just played 33 minutes in his first game back. So very, very obviously underpriced here. 6,200 looks great for him.
Yeah. And for everybody else, it's just business as usual. Play some Booker if you get him, play some Paul if you get him, play some Bridges if you get him. None of these guys are going to look great.
Yeah, and also with Bridges, like he's not produced very well this year. His rebounding numbers haven't been there. It's mostly for me, it's Paul, Booker, Ayton. Yeah. And Ayton being the only one that stands out.
All righty. Closing it out, Chicago Bulls 1-point underdogs in Portland, 220 total. Vooch still out for Chicago. Javonte Green is questionable. Damian Lillard and Norm Powell also questionable. I'm excited to talk about the Chicago Bulls team that is now running basically DeMar DeRozan at the 5 for chunks of time. That's never been a thing in my mind. All 5 guys that I'm about to mention are all like 10 to 15% owned, maybe up to 20 on FanDuel. DeRozan, Levine, Ball, Caruso, Tony Bradley. I want to play all of them. Some, like Lonzo Ball, I want to play a lot more, like at 6K on FanDuel, or even Zach LaVine at 7,900. But either way, I think the starting five for Chicago looks exceptional.
Yeah, so do I. And this is a game where I like Tony Bradley. We've seen the playing time be pretty volatile for him, but now you're going up, against a front court that has Nurkic, that is going to play Cody Zeller for some number of minutes. Bradley played 27 minutes against the Lakers. I think it's likely you get, at least 24 to 26 from him. He's only 3,300. He's close to a fantasy point per minute guy. So he's another example of someone where the more minutes he gets, it becomes pretty likely pretty quickly that you have to have him. And it's not just, he's adding an extra, half point for every time he's out there or every minute he's out there. So the only knock on Bradley is the position, but he looks like a great value. I think Lonzo at 6,500 looks great. LaVine and DeRozan both look good. Caruso at 4,300 looks fine as well. He didn't play very well last game, but he still played 34 and a half minutes. I don't expect him to score 0 points again. So yeah, all of Chicago to me, all of the starting five looks good.
We are on the same page here. I don't have anything else to add, but this is probably going to be the team that I have the most of when all is said.
It's either them or Minnesota for me, probably.
Yeah.
Well, them or Minnesota in terms of number of players, in terms of exposure to any one player, probably Dallas.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. We close it out with Portland. I'm assuming Lillard and Powell are both in. Obviously, play more of the guys that are in if they sit. Dame 8,200 still on FanDuel. I will be playing more than the 16% we're currently projecting. He's 5.5 on DraftKings. I think that's still appealing. CJ looks okay. Probably not much else for me for Portland, given that they have no qualms playing to the matchups, closing with a combo of Nas Little and Larry Nance their last time out. So it's pretty much just Lillard and CJ for me.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at as well. There's always, whenever you look at Nurkic at 6,400, it's tempting. But I think the fact that there's so many good centers and that even in that price range, you have DeAndre Ayton, who just doesn't have the same minutes questions, makes it pretty difficult to get to Nurkic. I do think, and it's not a huge deal with it being a slate this big, but we talked about Bradley, I think being a very good value at 3,300. Larry Nance at 3,200 is kind of like, if Larry Nance plays a bunch of minutes, Bradley maybe plays less minutes. So it's almost like a leverage against Bradley, in that price range. So large field tournaments, I do have some interest in Larry Nance, but clearly not going to be a priority. We have seen the minutes ramping up a bit though.
And with the way that Chicago could potentially close, where they don't have to have a big out there, Portland is not afraid to take Yusuf Nurkic off the floor at this point. And
right. I guess I should have, because I when we were talking about Bradley, I said that, I'd like that Portland has Nurkic and Zeller, which I do, but it should also be stated that Portland clearly doesn't mind not using them. This isn't like the Jazz where they're not going to take Rudy Gobert off the floor.
Right.
This is, you still could see this just devolve into a just like 5 out, no center on the floor type game.
Yeah. DeMar DeRozan played multiple minutes as the 5 for Chicago recently, which as a guy that came out as a shooting guard, that must be a real mind bender for him, but it's whatever. Anything else here for Portland?
Now somebody said leverage, or Josh said leverage doesn't equal success. Yeah, obviously it's just looking for spots to get negative correlation with the field. Nothing you do is going to guarantee you win $100,000 against 35,000 people any given night.
No, trust me, if we could, I would stop doing this show. That would be the only thing that I'd worry about. All righty, everybody. Adam will be back later with the deep dive written article and the deeper dive show at 4:45. That's it for me, though. Make sure you're checking out the contenders videos and the process. Adam, any final thoughts before we leave?
No, deep dive article will be out in a couple hours. Deeper dive later.
There it is, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to PrizePicks for being the presenting sponsor. Make sure you're hitting that like button as you leave and using that promo code Coach K to sign up for our college basketball projections. Good luck tonight, everybody. We're back again tomorrow.